As a film fan, there will always be films which I deem to be underrated. This can be because they're unfairly disliked by many people despite being really good, or this can be due to the fact that no one talks about them despite being fantastic. For me, most underrated movies fall into that latter group, mostly due to the fact that I don't have too many unpopular opinions. However, I wanted to include all varieties of underrated movies, so one of the movies on this list is here due to the fact that it's unfairly disliked. In this video, I will cover a total of 5 movies which I consider to be underrated. Now, these certainly are not the only movies I find underrated, these are just 5 random ones I picked out because I wanted to talk about them. If you guys like this video, then I may do a second edition, as there are so many films I could talk about in a list like this. Before we begin, I want to reassure everyone that this video will be 100% spoiler free. That's mostly because I want to use this video to encourage viewers to check out any movies which they may not have even heard of, in case they end up loving it. Trust me, there's no greater feeling than recommending a movie to someone and having them end up loving it. Anyway, let's move on to the list. This is in no ranking order, by the way, it's simply in order from oldest to newest. First up, we have a film from the land down under. The Castle is the definition of a comfort movie, and I want more people to check it out. Firstly, I should clarify that this film is really big and popular in Australia. However, I put it on this list because it is barely talked about outside of its home country. It's only got a little over 1,000 reviews on Letterboxd after all. Anyway, the main plot of this film is that a family is about to be evicted from their home, which Daryl the father nicknames the castle by the way, all because the airport they live next to is about to undergo an expansion. The rest of the film is Daryl's attempts to keep his house in this David and Goliath style story of the little guy standing up to the big business. One of the main reasons why I love this film is because it's just really funny throughout. The jokes are wacky but fun and aren't too complex, so a simple-minded bimbo like myself can have a good time. The scenarios which appear in this film can be so random that they're just hilarious, and the image of this family home with giant power lines being right next to an airport is just so funny. However, the main reason I love this film is because of how simple and pleasant it is. The plot is incredibly basic here, but it isn't really a problem because it's a great piece of harmless entertainment, and it is a really easy watch which anyone can enjoy. Also, because the plot is so simple, nothing bad really happens, so you just live with a good feeling after you finished it. The characters are all so lovable, with Daryl being the main example of that, as he may be the single nicest father character in film. He's just so sweet, caring, lovable, gentle and funny, and you really want to see him succeed. Overall, this film is just warm and pleasant throughout, and if you ever have a really bad or stressful day, or if you've just watched the 4th film on this list, then I definitely recommend putting it on to lift your spirits. Also, a lot of the film is set in courts where Daryl is negotiating the house deals, so that means that this film is actually my favourite court drama.
Tell him he's dreaming.
Next up, we have Cars, which may seem like the oddball of this group, but let me explain myself. Unlike these other films, Cars is very well known and many people have seen it. However, despite that, many people still consider this film to be the black sheep of the 2000s Pixar movies, and some people even say that is bad. I personally think that this film is not bad at all, and is in fact just as good as a lot of the 2000s Pixar films, and better than most of the 2010 films. Don't get me wrong, I used to be a Cars hater, and I'll explain why later, but after rewatching it last year, I grew to really appreciate it, and after rewatching it again this year, I loved it. I probably won't need to explain the plot, but I'll do it anyway for the sake of consistency. Basically, a young hotshot racer named Lightning McQueen is trying to get to the biggest race of his life, but he ends up getting lost on the interstate and has to do community service in a small town off the map called Radiator Springs, where he grows to enjoy the simpler life there, and learns that life isn't all about taking the fast lane, and going slow is just as good. From that description alone, you may be able to tell that my favourite part of the movie is the fairly unique message presented here, as well as the character of Lightning McQueen himself. The message isn't usually one of the go-to messages in kids movies, but it's definitely a good one and an important one. Taking life at a leisurely pace is way better than trying to rush through everything, as you end up missing some of the simpler and nicer parts of living. The only problem with this message is the fact that this was the reason I didn't like the film as a kid, as I used to find this film really boring due to the slower pace of the story. But I definitely disagree with myself now. Anyway, Lightning is an absolutely fantastic protagonist, and he has a really strong character arc, where he goes from being a hotshot asshole to a well-liked and respected hero. It's just really nice to see him grow, and just like with the castle, this film is just pleasant comfort viewing. The ending of the film is especially heartwarming. The side characters are also great. Yeah, Mater can be a tad grating to me, but that's not because of his character, but purely because I don't really like Larry the Cable Guy as an actor. However, the other characters from Luigi and Guido to Doc Hudson played by the legendary Paul Newman are all fantastic. Seriously, Doc has to be one of the greatest mentor characters in film because he is just so caring and he also goes through a great arc. One criticism I see leveled at this film is the fact that no one knows how this world works. For me, I accept that it's a wacky and creative idea and I just roll with it. Even then, most of the inconsistencies and parts which make no sense come from Cars 2, not this film. Another reason people don't like this film is because of the merchandise it produced, and all I say to that is, just look at the MCU. There's a lot more good about this film, but I won't be able to cover it all without this video being too long, but the main stuff I love is McQueen's arc, the great message, and also Doc Hudson. If you also find the first Cars movie incredibly underrated, then I recommend checking out this fantastic analysis of the 3 Cars movies by The Unlucky Tug. Seriously, it's fantastic. And next up we have the only Christmas movie on this list. Yes, I know it's nearly Halloween and we have a Christmas movie here, but whatever. There are definitely other underrated Christmas movies out there, like Arthur Christmas, but a lot of them have many fans, whereas I don't see anyone talk about this gem. In this dark festive film, a mining operation on a mountain in Finland has uncovered the real Santa Claus, not the Coca-Cola commercialized one. This is the Santa who kidnapped naughty children before killing them. The story is all about a boy named Pietri and his father uncovering one of Santa's elves before they track down Saint Nick himself trapped in the ice, and they try to destroy it. A lot of people watching this video will have already drawn comparisons between this and the Krampus story. Sorry, I just jumped into Reece Shearsmith right there. However, this movie is very different from the Krampus movies, and much better than all of them, because it's more weird, wacky, fun and clever in its chill factor. Chill. First off, this film is actually a prequel to various 10-minute videos which surfaced on the internet back in the mid-2000s. These videos were all about tracking down the various Santas around the world, who were really just the elves. This movie explained where they all came from and how the Rare Exports operation started. From that alone, you can tell how different the story is from Krampus, but the tone and quality is also quite different. Rare Exports is not a generic slasher, it's more uneasy in its creep factor with things like the dead reindeer. However, despite that, the film is quite a fun watch. There are many creative ideas and fun moments like the bear trap up the chimney for example, and it is certainly memorable. Despite being a bit of dumb fun, I was still hooked throughout and was actually quite sad at the end of the film due to the fact that it's only an hour and 10 minutes. Overall though, the ideas from this film are so weird and ludicrous that it is really fun and is definitely a film I recommend watching with friends to have a good time. It's not the deepest movie by any means, but it's a great bit of fun horror to put on during the festive season. After all, nothing says Christmas like hundreds of naked elves running after a kid in the Scandinavian winter. Don't worry, they were added in post so Pietri's actor isn't traumatized from what he saw. If you want to watch this film, I will warn you that 95% of the film is in Finnish. At least I think that's what the language is. So the only way to watch it is with subtitles. That's one of the main reasons why it's on this list. Whilst Rare Exports is reportedly really big in Scandinavian countries like Norway and Finland, it is rarely talked about anywhere else and is just like the castle in that regard. However, if you can deal with subtitles, then I definitely recommend putting this on with friends once you've finished Muppets Christmas Carol or something. And now we have my absolute favourite from this list, and the sole reason why I made this video in the first place. Whilst the other films on this list are all 9 out of 10s, Padak is an easy 10 out of 10, as I find it near perfect. But what is Padak? It's a film most of you probably haven't heard of before, like most of the films on this list. Even those from its origin country of South Korea may not have even heard of it, because it bombed hard at the box office. I honestly never heard of it, and neither had anyone I mentioned it to. However, I found a couple scenes from this film on YouTube, and it really impacted me and left me morbidly curious, so that's why I ended up watching the whole film. However, for those of you who don't know about the film, I'll run it down for you. Padak's basically what you get when you take the tank scenes from Finding Nemo, and have it set in a sushi restaurant. Yes, I'm dead serious. I should probably clarify that despite being an animated fish film, Padak is not for kids by any means. It is one of the most bleak, dark, depressing, and disturbing films I have ever seen in my life. In the plot, Padak is a mackerel who is captured by fishermen and put into one of these tanks in the restaurant, where she interacts with other fish there like Spotty and Master Oldfish. And that's about as much as I can say without spoiling anything, and without showing any grisly imagery. Trust me, this film can be quite gory, and I don't really want to expose you to it if you're not prepared. Despite being traumatizing, I still love this film though. It has become one of my new favourite films, and there's many reasons why. The story is super engaging throughout, as you have no idea what will happen next, and you have no ideas what the characters will do next, as they can be quite unpredictable. Speaking of the characters, they are absolutely brilliant because we see their moral dilemmas. None of the characters are really that likeable, and they all do pretty heinous things, which I won't spoil. However, as an audience, we see where they're coming from most of the time. The darkness, whilst being pretty hard-hitting and extreme a lot of the time, makes sense within the narrative of the story because the setting is horrific, and also because the film is trying to send a message about inhumane sushi restaurants in South Korea. The atmosphere and tone as a result of this is top notch, and the colours of the film really sell how grimy and miserable the situation is. Finally, the animation, whilst bad for the humans, is decent throughout, but is absolutely gorgeous during the 3 musical sequences. Oh yeah, there's musical sequences in this film, and they are genuinely breathtaking. One of them has legitimately become one of my favourite scenes in film and caused me to shed a tear by the end. I'm not even joking. This is one of the few films to actually make me cry, even if it doesn't sound like much. Trust me, I rarely cry anything more than a single tear. The only exception is like the 12 Days of Christine and Up. So overall, Padak is a film which I absolutely adore. It's definitely not the easiest film to find due to being so obscure, although it's on Amazon Prime and Steam, I believe. But if you don't plan to watch this film, which is fair, then I recommend at least checking out the first song called The Nightmare in the description for a taste of the film's general tone. It's a fantastic scene and definitely recommend it.
Also, as an aside, why do people find the eel character hot? Yeah, he's got a really smooth singing voice, but you guys are weird.
Captain Fantastic is a film I had never heard of before I watched it. However, unlike other films like Rare Exports or The Castle, my parents hadn't even heard of this film. I only found out about it due to the fact that this is one of the 12 films I'm studying for 6th form film studies. Honestly, I'm quite glad that the curriculum represents underrated gems like this, as it means that more people can actually see it, which is good because Captain Fantastic is fantastic. So, the film is all about this family led by the father Ben, who lives off the grid in the Pacific Northwest. However, Ben's wife Leslie commits suicide, and the rest of the film revolves around Ben and his 6 kids taking their RV across America to go to a funeral, which they were refused entry to by Leslie's father. Throughout the film, we see the conflicting ideologies between Leslie's side of the family and Ben's lifestyle, and we see throughout the film the positives and negatives of both. One thing I love about the film is the fact that both sides are explicitly shown to be in the wrong. Leslie's father, Jack, is in the wrong for not allowing Leslie's own husband and children to go to a funeral, and he is also wrong for ignoring his daughter's will. However, Ben is also in the wrong for putting his kids through intense physical exercises every day of their life, and for giving them weapons as gifts. There is also another reason for why Ben is in the wrong, but that would be a spoiler. Throughout the film, your perspective constantly changes between who's good or who's bad in this dynamic, before you settle on the fact that they're both equally flawed. However, both parties are also equally right. Jack was right to be worried for his grandchildren's health, and Ben was right to go to the funeral in the first place and pay respects to his own wife. Both parties are flawed, but they are still good at the end of the day because they both love the kids. Overall, the film is about compromise. You may need to sacrifice your routines in order to make those you love safe and happy, and you may need to accept those you disapprove of because that's who those you love want to be with. I think it's a really great message, and also, after reading some reviews, I think some people missed the message. If you're one of those people who missed it, I hope you understand now. Overall, this is a fantastic movie, and I can totally see why it was chosen to be studied, as there is a lot to unpack here, and I only really scratched the surface. I haven't even mentioned the fact that the location work is gorgeous, the child acting is really good, and the film is paced really well. However, I want you guys to check out this film before I reveal anything else. So, those are 5 very different movies which I deem to be underrated due to the fact they are not appreciated as much as they should be. Obviously, I recommend checking out or rewatching all of these films if you haven't already, and if this video has led you to appreciate one of these films more, or has led you to come across a film you've never heard of but ended up loving, please let me know, as that will really make my day. Anyway, be sure to let me know some of your underrated movies in the comments below, and I hope to see you all again soon. Also, no, I'm not going to cover overrated movies, because I like my head on my shoulders instead of on a pike.